So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today from across the world. It's our pleasure to host today's For Coral webinar, which is Harnessing Artificial Intelligence to Monitor Coral Reefs. This is done in collaboration with the Reef Resilience Network and digiLab, as well as our partners MERMAID, Wildflow, UCL, Reef Cloud and Blue Pangolin. The webinar will last 90 minutes and it's hosted under the ICRI chair, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, represented by the General Organization for Conservation of Coral Reefs and Turtles in the Red Sea, also known as SHAMS. Just to briefly introduce myself for those who may not already know me, my name is Margot Monfarid and I'm the International Policy and Advocacy Director for the International Coral Reef Initiative. And it's a pleasure to be moderating today and help guide us through what we hope will be a very engaging and insightful session. So just before we officially get started, I'd like to run through a few quick housekeeping notes. So the presentations today will be delivered in English only, and the webinar is being recorded, as you can see. This recording, along with the slides, will be available on the dedicated events page after this webinar. During the webinar, we'll also host a Q&A session, which we ask that for any questions you may have, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. We'll be reviewing the questions throughout the webinar, and some will be answered live by the speakers during the session, whilst others might be addressed directly in writing via the Q&A feature by the panelists. The chat is also open for general comments and technical support, so please feel free to reach out there if you need any help. But note that questions submitted in the chat may not be seen or answered, so we do encourage you to use the Q&A function. Just a brief overview of the agenda. So after this, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown over ICRI and who we are. And then we're going to hear from Andy Corbett, who's going to give an overview of digiLab before jumping into his presentation topic, all at sea uncertainty aware AI for coral monitoring with KCRI. Then we're going to hear from Emma Kennedy from Images to Insight, democratizing coral reef monitoring for global impact. Apologies on my pronunciation. Then Ben Williams, unlocking the soundscape for coral reefs with AI. And then we'll hear from Alex, a shared model, many contributions, co-creating better, simpler coral reef AI for all. And last but not least, Sergey on 3D coral reef maps. Then we'll head into our Q&A and have a closing session. So if you're not already aware of who ICRI is, we're a global partnership created over 30 years ago to unite governments and organisations around coral reef conservation. Today, ICRI represents 102 members, including 45 countries, which are custodians to 75% of the world's coral reefs. Our mission is pretty clear, which is to drive urgent and collaborative global action to conserve, protect and restore coral reefs. And this is to ensure their resilient, sustainable management for people, economies and nature. ICRI plays a very unique role in bridging science, policy and practice, and we also established the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network back in 1995 to provide the best available science on the status and trends of coral reef ecosystems. Looking ahead, our new plan of action for 2025 to 2027, which is currently under development, will be focused on scaling up solutions. So ICRI is really aiming to continue to ensure that coral reefs remain a priority in the global agenda. As you all know, this year has been a critical turning point for ocean action. So to strengthen collective global advocacy, the ICRI Secretariat, together with 20 experts from 16 organisations, developed something called the Key Policy Ask for Coral Reefs. With 16 out of the 23 global biodiversity framework targets highly relevant to coral reefs, prioritising these ecosystems in global ocean policy has really been essential. So these policy asks provide a unified platform to accelerate urgent coordinated action for coral reef conservation, and they ensure reefs remain high on the global agenda. You can see on the screen that we have 8 main focus areas, such as address localized threats, increase strength and protection and conservation. There's also restoration, equitable and collaborative governance, as well as scaling finance, among others. So we do really encourage you to explore these and utilize the messaging in your ongoing efforts, and you can check them out in more detail by scanning the QR code here. If anyone is interested in learning more about ICRI and what we do, please don't hesitate to contact me after the webinar. We don't just do policy asks, we have a wealth of other knowledge and products that we do produce. So it's now my pleasure to introduce you to the co-host of today's webinar, Andy Corbett, who's digiLab's Director of AI. Andy has over a decade-long academic career focused on applied mathematics and has delivered solutions across engineering, medical AI, computer vision, and LLM deployment. So over to you, Andy.
Okay, hello. Sharing my screen, is that kind of working loud and clear?
Looks great, thank you.
Great. Okay, hello. Nice to meet you. So thanks for the introduction. I was just wondering what I was going to say about myself, but there we go. That sums it up. Director of AI digiLab. So I'll just start with digiLab. So we exist essentially because there's uncertainty in the world. And let me sort of say what that means in this context. When I'm talking about uncertainty, I'm talking about uncertainty in the data that we collect and the data that we use. So this could be when you're recording sensor information, you get sort of stochastic wobbles all over the place. Or perhaps when you're performing measurements and you've left huge gaps out, all contributions to uncertainty that go towards our decision making that we have to work out. But also uncertainty with respect to us as humans and our intuitions. How we set up models and how we understand the environment impacts the work that we do, and it comes with a degree of uncertainty. And especially, it's not necessarily a bad thing. When data is sparse or when we don't have access to information, we have to bake in that intuition to our models. And so understanding how it affects and how what we know to fall back on it is really important. But finally, uncertainty in models themselves. And now more than ever in the kind of sort of modern age of AI and frontier AI, uncertainty is something which has sort of been left in the dust, and understanding risk, how models can deal with unknown situations, is a huge open question. And those questions are questions that we want to answer at digiLab. So how are we going to do that? And let me clear my slide. So maybe I'll start before how, a bit of who we are. We're a team based in the southwest of the UK, consisting of, well, it's a very interesting bunch of people, a huge range of expertise, piling into a research lab, which we're calling The Lab. We thought long and hard about that name, which is one division of our company, and it's one way to work with us. We also have a platform engineering team, as well as a forward deployed group of solution engineers, another group of experts with PhDs in nuclear fusion, in water engineering. So that's how we can send those forward to work with our clients. But what is it exactly that we offer and do? Well, sorry, maybe dwelling on the how. When you think about uncertainty, we want to bring a solution which is using AI to help industries solve problems which are otherwise out of touch. That's why we're doing deep research into some of society's grand challenges, so that we can build models which quantify risk and allow sectors, safety critical sectors, use and trust those models to make predictions and for decision intelligence. So exactly how do we, what do we plan on doing with that? Well, we've got a platform called the Uncertainty Engine that allows you to construct in a no-code environment AI workflows that for the purpose of secure deployment, which is kind of the critical problem when you're trying to embed these infrastructures into businesses, and diagnose and audit the flow of data and the predictions that they make through workflows. So all of this about digiLab, I just want to sort of pause and say, do reach out and ask any questions as we get through to the Q&A. But beyond that, I'm happy to help where I can. So that's the kind of the why, the how, and then the what. So let's move towards this talk right now. So this talk's called AI at Sea. I think we had all at sea on the introduction, which is fine too, because we are all at sea, I suppose, when we're going to do these projects. But the important part is perhaps the subtitle here, which is Uncertainty Aware AI for Coral Monitoring with KCRI. And what I want to do is go through a series of projects and deployments for how we've made the processes of KCRI more efficient, and how we've allowed them to deploy AI to improve the purpose of coral monitoring, which is, I'm sure, something that everyone is interested in here. So, first of all, KCRI, who are they, and what the partnership is. So digiLab, we're coming from a deeply technical background where we're able to provide workflows in some of the most safety critical environments, such as nuclear fusion, such as sensor placement in water networks. And we're working with KCRI, who have one of the largest coral reef restoration projects in the world, in the Red Sea. And so, what's the challenge here? Well, the challenge here is that so far manually, KCRI, this is KAUST's Coral Restoration Initiative, Coral Reef Restoration Initiative. So far manually, the initiative has been out farming corals to about 1 hectare. And the goal is to scale this up to 100 hectares in the next few years. Now, if you sort of do the maths, the manual maths, and if you're just using human power and guesswork, then this is going to be an extremely expensive process. So where does digiLab fit in? We're KCRI's AI partner, and we're here to make the processes more efficient, make them automated, but to also trust them and deploy them in a secure way. Another goal of KCRI is not just to complete this project, this is the core project, but in doing so, build tools which will be able to be outsourced to other projects globally. So that's where KCRI and digiLab are trying to make an impact. So that's the challenge. So let's just dive in slightly deeper to the challenge, and let's focus on, and this will be the focus for the rest of the talk, the monitoring and outplanting cycle. So trying to scale up the outplanting of coral reefs over all of this territory involves harvesting and growing corals in and ex situ nurseries. And that's what we see on the left-hand side here. These are some underwater coral trees, and there's some ex situ sites as well where corals are grown on plugs. But also collecting data and performing remote sensing and making use of that information over the region. Where does all this go? So this then lives in a complex database and is collected for the purpose of then going background, using the information to tell you when you should be outplanting corals and when you have the best chance of survivorship. So how can you optimize this process and how can you maximize your returns? So that's the problem that we want to tackle. And what we're going to do is replace some of these processes with AI workflows. So how can AI help us in each of these features? So with the first, in terms of growing corals in and ex situ nurseries, we perform some workflows related to automated measurement. And I'll dive more into the details of those in a moment. For sensors, we consider optimal sensor placement and building models that create a full view of the environment based on just a few sensed locations. Again, this is using AI in a region where there's not much data coming in, but being able to trust its predictions out of sample. And finally, when that's fed into complex data sets, I'm sure you've all been there, faced with another sort of spreadsheet, deploying natural language agents, which can not only retrieve and do basic analysis, but also access other workflows, other predictive AI workflows, which can do, say, survival analysis and forecasting in a user-friendly way, because it's critical that all of these tools that we build are able to be deployed in the field, so they really speed up the process for the practitioners. So this here frames a few workflows that I want to focus on. I thought what I'd do is then go through those and explain, there's a fair question is what is AI and how does it interact? So maybe I'll dive into some of that and you can ask me some questions about it. And then sort of summarize at the end. So that's where we're going with this. So first of all, automating coral measurements. So at KCRI, one strategy is introducing coral nurseries underwater and then outplanting these. A key question is when to outplant, when are corals ready, and how to collect the data. And I've heard lots of interesting stories of divers going down with laminated pieces of paper and some special pens that you can write on, sort of using rulers to estimate corals hanging on trees. But we're proposing an alternative approach, which is automatic and hopefully far more accurate in terms of processing that data and making predictions on it. So what we do is we send divers down with GoPros who swim around these coral trees and collect video data. So then when this comes to us, the challenge for the entry point to our workflows, the workflows that we deploy in our platform there, is that a video comes in. And the first step is to reconstruct this in 3D. And this is the second image that you see there. Reconstructing this in 3D means we suddenly have a much richer set of information than the video is telling us. I mean, if you tried your ruler trick on the video, sure you could, but you'd have a fair bit of geometry and mathematics to work out. And that's compressed all that information into a usable form. There's still some work to do because the AI then needs to segment the corals, and we need to make estimates about the geometries, if it meshes to them. But that's all taken care of. As a point of reference on these trees, we know how long the bars are, so we can fit lines to those, and we have uncertainty about that point of reference. We use probabilistic models. So at the end result, we have corals with volumes, we can measure them, and from that video, automate that set of data straight into the database. So that's one application of AI for coral measurements. Another is in situ, and here we have these. Maybe some of you are very familiar with these images and trying to look at them and detect when are they to. These are coral plugs harvesting, growing new coral colonies, waiting for them to fuse so that they are then ready to outplant. And the data that needs to be collected here is essentially an indicator of outplant readiness. And what we do here is segment the size of those images, detect when there are any anomalies or if there's any attention to be paid to them. And if you imagine huge warehouses of these experiments, well, not sorry, experiments, these outplantations, then this is something that manually is very expensive to do. And so automation is sort of essential. Now here we perform segmentation, but also diagnose uncertainty again about when you have species that you don't expect. Maybe you've got algae covering the plant, or maybe you've just got corals which may not be in a segment, or maybe they've not fused together. Understanding that probabilistically is critical because what you can do is set a threshold, set an indicator off to the operator and say this particular example needs human intervention. So that's when you can come in and intersect. In all of the other situations, AI with risk assurance is predicting within a confidence range, within a risk appropriate range, so that it can be trusted. And then you just have to spend time where it's needed. And so on to the next application that we're looking at, and that's thinking about how we've put sensors in water in the Red Sea for the purpose of measuring temperature and other indicators of survivorship for corals. And here, sensors are expensive, and of course, it's not clear always where to put them. Now, if the ultimate goal is to build a model of temperature and to use that information to make predictions, then that's the only point where you need to place a sensor to build the model that makes that prediction. And so what we do is build such models. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of soundbite that I like to use when it comes to this is uncertainty. It's crucially important for when you want to make a critical decision. But it's also it's not just a toy. It is something that can be used for efficiency and gain. So when you know what you don't know, then you know where to look, is one way to summarize this. So iteratively adding sensors with a machine learning algorithm tells you where to place the next one. And this is the optimal way to understand and build models, digital twins of temperature and environmental factors. And so yeah, that's another application of AI that we're working on with KCRI. And then finally, so I've been reeling through various ways to automate and collect data for the purpose of outplanting coral. But where does it all live, and what do we do? What do we do with it? Why collect it in the first place? And I'll pause for a second, and maybe the practitioners among you can sort of imagine what you might do after you've been on a field trip, taking recordings, is that you probably get back to your computer and dump it in something like this, an Excel spreadsheet, and that's collected in a whole series of files. But this is something which is possibly not scalable. One answer to this is to build a source of truth database, but a problem comes in when you need data engineers to understand and deploy that to the users back again. Another route is to build an AI interface, an AI agent which can talk to the database with natural language, make lookups, and perform analysis so that you can make complex data and data which is sort of as wide as your whole organization available to everyone so that they can gain knowledge from it. So that's kind of the end of my set of AI for coral reef restoration examples. Hopefully some of you find those interesting. And like I say, I'll be happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's super interesting to learn more about the automated coral measurements that you use. And if anyone does have questions, please do just pop them in the chat and Andy will be able to answer them during the Q&A towards the end of the webinar. So next we'll hear from Emma Kennedy, who's the science lead for Reef Cloud at the Australian Institute of Marine Science, where she works with a team to transform how reef data is collected, analysed and shared for conservation impact. Thank you so much for joining us, Emma. I know it's super late where you are.
Hi, everybody. Can you see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes, all perfect.
Thank you so much, Margot, for the introduction, and thank you for having me today. I'm going to be talking about Reef Cloud and sharing about how AI is helping us scale reef monitoring from local surveys to global conservation impact. Before I start, I did want to acknowledge the Wulgurukaba people, who are the traditional owners of the land that I'm joining you from in Northern Queensland, Australia, and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and for any First Nations people joining us online tonight. The big challenge, at least the way that I see it, that we face in monitoring at the moment is the speed and scale at which reefs are degrading. Statements like this one from the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, who put a huge amount of effort into compiling, standardizing, and sharing data to make these really powerful and important assessments of our global reef health that are important for telling everybody what's happening, are drawn from a surprisingly small number of data points. We know there's lots of monitoring locations worldwide, but if we imagine each location as a 50 or 100 meter transect, it's really like trying to understand the ocean from a drop of water. And that limited coverage, not just in terms of geographic spread, but also in sampling frequency, is really becoming a bigger issue as reefs are degrading faster and faster. And it's really kind of restricting our ability to properly track what's happening. And we're still scrambling, for example, to understand the full impact of the fourth global coral bleaching event. So why is monitoring so limited? Much of it comes down to the fact that to make these detailed observations, especially those kind of fine scale changes in coral community composition that we need to understand really what's going on, still relies heavily on people jumping into the water. And that makes monitoring expensive and it makes it slow. And it sometimes requires some taxonomic expertise, which can be a real barrier to people getting involved. And perhaps a bigger issue is even when the data are collected, they're often not shared or they're not standardized in ways that allow comparison across different organizations and different geographies. And all of these barriers are weakening the bridge between data and decision making. So the result is that the people that are charged with protecting and managing their reefs aren't always getting the best science to guide them. We know technologies are capable of helping us break down some of these barriers. When I started out as a marine biologist, we literally used to swim along with a slate and pencil writing down what we saw, which was very slow. Today, digital photography has become the #1 way that we collect information about reefs, and photos offer these big advantages. They're standardized, they create these permanent records, and as cameras are becoming cheaper, monitoring is more inclusive, and you don't have to be a coral reef expert to contribute. But generating more data is only really the first step. We need data science and new technologies to help us turn those images into information faster, to synthesize and add value and meaning to the interpretation of the data, and share our insights across organizations to provide better guidance on how to help the reefs. And that's really going to be how we're going to keep pace with these rapid changes happening on reefs. It's not just collecting more photos, but extracting more meaning and value from those photos. So the tech that I wanted to share with you this evening is called Reef Cloud. It's a public digital platform for storing, analyzing, and sharing coral reef monitoring data. And you can visit it at reefcloud.ai. Reef Cloud is an AIMS-led initiative, the Australian Institute of Marine Sciences, where I work. It's built really by coral reef scientists for coral reef scientists. It started out as a tool just to support our own long-term monitoring activities, but with guidance from partners right across the Pacific who were facing similar monitoring challenges to us, we kind of adapted it into something that was open and that we could share with everybody to use. At its core, Reef Cloud brings together 3 digital innovations. The first is using cloud-based computing to securely store, organize, and standardize photo data to create this global permanent record of reef health. The second is AI, which we're all here to talk about this evening, that speeds up the extraction of that key biological information from the photos. And then the third is advanced statistical modeling, which integrates the data from lots of different projects and delivers it in near real time in a single standardized format directly to decision makers. And that modeling really helps us manage some of that uncertainty that Andy was talking about as well. So each of these innovations addresses kind of a different monitoring challenge. And so for the remainder of my time with you, I would like to go through the 3 of them and show some examples of how real researchers are benefiting from them. So firstly, the storage and management of data in one safe, accessible online repository. How's that helping? Well, our organization AIMS is responsible for one of the most extensive and longest running monitoring programs on the planet. Although we've got great coverage of the Great Barrier Reef, there's still huge gaps in our own understanding. And that doesn't mean that there aren't other organizations with knowledge about the reefs, but the way that science has been traditionally done means that it hasn't been very inclusive. And adoption of digital photography is this lovely opportunity to expand our networks of potential contributors to global understanding and reporting. But for those contributions to contributions to really count, the data's got to be gathered and organized. And that cloud computing and repository is kind of helping us not just store and manage data properly, but also gives a pathway for people to be able to contribute the data to those kind of bigger global insights as well. A nice example of this being used comes from the Bardi-Jawi Ranger Group up in remote Western Australia. The Indigenous saltwater communities right across the north are long-term custodians of reef areas, and they've got a lot of knowledge about their reefs, but that knowledge and their observations haven't always been included in global assessments, which leaves gaps in how we track reef health. The Bardi-Jawi, we've been working with them for a really long time, and they helped us test Reef Cloud at 11 of their long-term monitoring sites. And some of the feedback that they had to us was that instead of scientists coming and collecting images on their sea country and then taking them away and then returning with a report a year later, the online management part meant that the rangers could collect and own and control their own photo data and decide how it's used and shared. And their monitoring could now be used on the platform to feed directly back to their community. But for the first time, their monitoring of their sea country is now contributing to the next Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network report. And the success of this has been inspiring other ranger groups across Northern Australia, and they're building a little bit of an alliance now, a partnership, monitoring partnership. So this is a case where having a place to kind of hold, manage, and access data is helping a different reef community be part of that important conversation. The AI aspect helps because extracting reef health information from photos is incredibly slow and labor intensive. Our own monitoring team collects hundreds of photos per site, and each has to be manually classified. So we do this using a standard points-based sampling approach, which is pretty standard in reef monitoring with photo quadrat data, where we place dots across the image, and then we look at what's underneath each dot, identify it, and then sum the dots across all the photos and images to get proportional cover. But it can take several minutes for an expert to ID all the points on a single photo. And so that starts to create a bottleneck when we're collecting more images. So this is the point at which AIMS started thinking about deep learning neural networks and image recognition technology to develop our own AI models to recognize the corals in our photos. So for each project that you set up in Reef Cloud, a new machine is trained on annotation points by a human to recognize what's underneath each point. And once it's performing really well, it can help go through the remainder of the photos and pull out additional information on what it's seeing. Once trained, the AI can identify corals and other organisms across your photos 700 times faster than a human, but with a similar accuracy and minimal cost. And what's nice about it is we've set it up in a really flexible way. So you train your own machine on the benthic categories that you're interested in, whether that's coral species or perhaps just morphologies or even just coral, not coral, or bleached coral. But you can fit it to your own monitoring program. We didn't want to disrupt the way that people do their monitoring. And it's also very transparent. So you can track exactly how your machine is performing and have a lot of confidence in what it's doing as well. So AI obviously helps teams particularly teams that are generating a lot of photo data, like our team at AIMS, who generate 40,000 photos a year, our partners in Palau, who have 23 long-term monitoring sites that they visit every 2 years, and they helped us look at the prototype of Reef Cloud and get some to give us some feedback on it. And we uploaded 25,000 photos, which was 2 years of their monitoring data that had taken a team over 6 months to go through. And the machine had learned instantly from the annotations that they'd previously done in CPCE. And so now when they survey, they have the option just to add photos into their project, and the machine, because it's now trained, can just scan through them in minutes and identify everything. And this can be such a benefit, particularly to small teams that are under-resourced and becoming so stretched, especially now we're responding to additional bleaching events as well. The final feature is using smart statistical models that can integrate data from different teams and generate these kind of high-level summaries of things like coral and algal cover, important metrics that tell us about reef health status in near real time, as well as information on environmental drivers, which start helping us not just to put together how reefs are changing, but also why they're changing. And you can see here, this has been really great for us in the Pacific, where I live and work. We face an enormous monitoring challenge because there's 25% of the world's reefs here, but across a really, really broad geography, and there's a real lack of integrated monitoring and reporting across this region. But Pacific nations have really strong aspirations to improve this through the Pacific Coral Reef Monitoring Action Plan, and Reef Cloud has been working with a number of Pacific partners, from governments to NGOs, to see how it can support the action plan. So what's happened here is it's really become a place for collaboration and sharing, and the partnerships have come up with some great suggestions of other products, how we can advance some of our AI features, things like automatic reports, tools to help interpret data, manuals and more training materials as well. And we've been working collaboratively on this together. So it's really become this genuine platform for collaboration and innovation in the region. So today's webinar is about AI, and while the machine learning image recognition here is obviously a keystone of what Reef Cloud is doing because it speeds up our monitoring work, a larger part of it is expanding networks of contributors so that we can address these gaps in our understanding, and doing that by creating this kind of space for collaboration, because I feel like if you're going to be working on any kind of group project, and saving the reefs really does feel like a giant group project, you really need a shared space to be able to work. And so transparency, standardized organization of data, support to analyze, and new ways to share to improve insights that we get about what's happening on the reef are all key parts that complement what the AI can offer. So my take-home message, and I'm sorry, I'm gone over by a minute or so, is that I think we're trying not just to use AI for making monitoring more efficient, but to make it more equitable as well. And I know when I joined the Reef Cloud team, I was really scared that robots were going to steal my job. But what I've learned is AI isn't replacing ecologists, it's just helping us do our jobs better, faster, and at scale. And the success of tools like Reef Cloud really depend on partnership and trust and usability. And so everybody online tonight, your input is really crucial to help shape these tools. And I would invite you to join us and check out Reef Cloud.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's great to see that the global repository for reef data and how it's used, but also that it fits into your own monitoring program. So super interesting, and love the end message about making it more equitable and more efficient. So thank you very much for your presentation. Our third speaker is Ben Williams, who's an ENCODE AI for Science Fellow, researching how to integrate vision language models into digital twins of reefs. So over to you, Ben.
Sure, thank you. Okay, suspense for a moment. I'll try and share my screen. Is this looking okay?
Yes, see it well.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so lovely to be joining everyone today. My name's Ben. I've just finished my PhD in accelerating passive acoustic monitoring of coral reefs with AI. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And I guess I'll preface this with it's a lot less of a mature field compared to the amazing tools Emma just shared with us, and some of the others we've seen. So it's really involved kind of building from scratch and hacking things together. And I'm hoping to share a bit about how others could try and start doing this themselves as well. So yeah, I'll push on. And the first thing that you need to know, if you don't already, is that coral reefs are actually really noisy places. So I'm going to try and share with you a mixtape I've put together of some of the different reef sounds that we hear from around the world. So this is always tricky over Zoom, but bear with me. I'm going to push a button and hopefully you're going to hear some reef noise. Okay, hopefully you heard enough of that. I seem to cut short there. But yeah, those were all recordings we'd taken of reef organisms from around the world. And passive acoustic monitoring is this form of monitoring we can use that often complements others, like underwater visual surveys, for many different reasons that I don't have time to go into. But by listening to the reef, we can start learning about the state of these habitats and the organisms that are present here and what's going on. So my early work, very briefly, was focused on lowering the entry barriers to entering this field, because when I started just a few years ago now, the best recorders we could get, or lowest cost recorders we could get, were $3,000. But over time, we showed that we could turn to cheaper technology using GoPros, or even developing the Hydromoth recorder with open acoustics that has cut that cost by about 20-fold whilst delivering pretty much all the specs that you would need of an audio recorder. Now, this is great because it means it's much easier for anyone to begin listening to coral reefs. But that means we're now facing this data deluge where we have far more data than any one person or even a team of people could go and listen to and analyze manually. So of course, this is where automating this process with AI can help us out. So the first proof of concept project, I was fortunate to lead on this, was based around the Hope Reef area. So this is the epicenter of the world's largest coral reef restoration program that Mars have been operating and funding for nearly 20 years now. It's spread across the tropics. And across the broader Hope Reef area, we gathered audio recordings from healthy and degraded reefs. And from all of these recordings, from each minute of recording, I extracted a suite of acoustic metrics. So these are things like how loud is an audio file, what's the variability in frequencies, a whole bunch of metrics like this. And these could be used to train a machine learning model to identify the difference between healthy and degraded reef recordings. And then we found when we gave the model recordings of newly restored immature reefs, these still sounded degraded according to the model. But those reefs that were 2 to 3 years of age, were mature restoration, sounded resoundingly healthy. So this was a brilliant proof of concept that we could actually use AI to track the progress of reef recovery or some other conservation intervention. Now, this approach focused entirely on the whole soundscape. So we kind of take that whole audio file and try to extract some kind of signature from it. The next project I want to talk about is how we can identify a particular sound of interest. And so for us, this was the sound of bomb fishing, which is still highly prevalent in at least 20 countries across the tropics. If you're not familiar, bomb fishing basically is what it says on the tin, where fishermen throw improvised explosives onto coral reefs because that's where the fish are highly abundant. And it's a very efficient way to catch a heck of a lot of fish, but it's of course devastating to the reef habitats where it happens. So to give an example of this destruction, in Spamonde where we worked, if you look to the right here, we have panel B, which is a thriving, healthy reef in Spamonde, and maybe just 200 or 300 meters away, we have this reef, panel C on the bottom here, that was extensively bomb fished around 40 to 50 years ago. And when this happens continually, these reefs get degraded to this ecological state that's trapped as a rubble field, and they simply fail to recover. The rubble's loose, corals can't get a hold, and they don't grow back. So if you want to restore that, you have to go and implement restoration, which is incredibly costly to do. So what if we could actually get to the source of the problem? So in Spamonde, you can see the archipelago pictured here in Indonesia. We performed a couple of experiments. So we deployed a network of recorders for a week and found that we could hear bomb fishing at least 17 meters away. And I suspect in reality, we can hear it more like 20, 25, maybe 30 kilometers away. And that's because sounds travel so far underwater. So it's a really valuable medium to measure if bomb fishing is happening. And here we also kept this recorder deployed on a rolling basis, one of these for 16 months, because we wanted to get pretty much the first ever quantification in the world of the extent of bomb fishing happening somewhere. I've seen one other study that's done this in Tanzania, but it was just for a month. We wanted to do this long term. So working with the Mars team, the process went something like this, deploying an audio recorder and leaving it to listen out for bombs for a month. And then each month the team would collect the recorder, put another one down, and then they would take that month of audio data and put it through an AI model that I developed for the team. And crucially, this model was all about accelerating the human. So it certainly wasn't perfect. It still gave a large number of false positives for each month. But what it was able to do was turn each month of raw audio into just 4 hours that it then meant was achievable for the team to go and listen and check through. So with this approach, we gathered 3,650 hours of audio over this 16-month period, and then detected and verified over 3,500 instances of bomb fishing from this one single recorder. So frightening numbers, but that is the first ever quantification of it in this region and pretty much anywhere in the world. And if we scale that audio out to a year, that means we're getting about 8,500 bombs a year happening in this perhaps 17 to 30 kilometer radius that we could hear. So one thing I haven't mentioned about that project is how tricky it was to develop that AI model. So I spent a week myself listening and annotating audio data, then had to code up the model and train it from scratch. And this, of course, doesn't scale to every new reef sound that we want to work on. So today is a bit about sharing some methods you can use yourself. So if you want to start hacking together and creating your own AI models, I really encourage you to look at this concept of transfer learning. For example, this underpins Reef Cloud that Emma just talked about. So transfer learning has been helping accelerate bioacoustics massively. And I'll just take a minute to talk a bit technically about how this works. So in my work, I use a foundational pre-trained network. So this is one of the things you'll need. And the one I use is called Perch. That was developed by Google DeepMind's bioacoustics team, who I spent some time working with. And they trained Perch on over 3 million labeled audio recordings of different bird species, the sounds, and then Perch can, in theory, identify 10,000 different bird species when you give it audio. So this is brilliant for the bird folk, but we do not have that amount of annotated data in reef bioacoustics. But that doesn't mean that we can't still make use of Perch, because inside Perch, it's kind of captured the essence of bioacoustics. So say we have a new data from a coral reef somewhere in the world, we split it into 5-second recordings, and the network is going to have no idea what sounds are present, but we can teach it to do this. So instead of training the network, you put your audio through into this frozen network, which is very quick to do compared to training a deep neural network. From each of those audio recordings, you then get what's called an embedding. So this 5-second sample of audio will get given this string of numbers that the network is essentially treating as the essence of the bioacoustic sounds within it. That is really powerful. We can do a lot with these. So if we take that approach in parallel, we then just need a few dozen examples of a new fish sound and a few dozen examples of negatives. We get embeddings from each of these. We can train a very simple machine learning model to identify the difference in these embeddings. And then when that model is trained, it can then run on that entire embedded data set much faster, much more easily than training it from scratch. And this is something we created. It's called Surf Perch. It's optimized for learning new coral reef sounds. It needs a really minimal amount of data to fine tune it. You can run it on a normal personal laptop and greatly reduces the expertise. I can already see I'm going to be about a minute over time, but I'll whiz through this last one. So I've taken that approach, Surf Perch, transfer learning, and a few other tricks to measure progress of reef restoration across the tropics, working with this reef star approach you may have seen developed by Mars. And during this project, we gathered audio from 5 coral reef restoration projects around the world, 45 sites in total, with healthy, degraded, and restored coral reefs. We got over a year of raw audio from these sites, and then using Surf Perch and transfer learning, I developed detectors for 34 reef sounds across this data and got nearly 1 million high confidence detections of different sounds. Then these sounds could be used to estimate ecosystem processes. So things like sound is really important for recruiting juvenile fish to reefs, or estimating diversity of fish communities, parrotfish grazing, snapping shrimp bioturbation, important processes like that. And we see as we move from left to right, from a degraded reef to a 1 to 3 months old to maybe 3 to 4 years old restoration, we see significant improvements in these ecosystem processes, and of course differences between our healthy and degraded baselines. And so this was made possible through passive acoustic monitoring and AI that meant we could study this data at scales we never could have previously. And my final slide, like I say, I'm a PhD student who's been developing these tools myself, so not taking off the shelf stuff, but putting them together. And if you're someone interested in that, these are all the resources I have used myself to learn how to do this. I could not recommend them more highly enough. Also have a slightly more polished TEDx talk if you want to check that out. But yeah, I think these slides will be shared. So have a look at those resources if you want to learn to do this yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. Super interesting to hear how you've been using sound for monitoring coral reefs, so somewhat different to a few of the other presentations. So thank you for providing us a bit more context on the various different topics that you've been doing that with. Super interesting. Next, we're going to hear from Alex Claire Largo, who strengthens the MERMAID community through training, partnerships, and platform development, helping practitioners collect and apply coral reef monitoring data. So over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Margot. Thanks for promoting and hosting this really incredible webinar. Really great stuff that we heard so far. Let me share my screen. I hope this is good, visible to everyone.
Yes,
so great. So good morning, good evening to everyone. Today I'll be presenting on how MERMAID is working to integrate and make AI more collaborative and simpler for coral reef monitoring. So I'm Alex Lago and I work at WCS as the MERMAID Field Support and Partnerships Manager. So next slide, there you go. So just introducing MERMAID for those that are not familiar with the initiative and the platform. It was developed by the nonprofit Wildlife Conservation Society, and it really came from an internal need of its coral reef program. They needed to find a better way to manage data and to make data also standardized and more readily available for analysis and reporting. So it was really the first and global cloud-based data platform designed for coral reef monitoring. It integrates not just benthic, but also fish, bleaching, and soon microinvertebrate data into one open source and free system that is continuously evolving and improving from all the feedback that we gather from users all over the world. And today we have over 3,000 users from more than 180 organizations that range from NGOs to universities and governmental agencies, of which 94% actually fall outside WCS. So MERMAID has truly become a global community-driven platform that is standardizing data across more than 8,000 sites in 51 countries. But as you saw from Emma, this is really just a drop in the ocean compared to all the sites that we should be monitoring. Currently, we monitor less than 13% of coral reefs. So we really need to find ways to scale coral reef monitoring around the world. And with that, now we're taking a first step into integrating artificial intelligence for coral reef monitoring into MERMAID. So we're really just starting this process by releasing the first beta model to classify coral reef images integrated directly into the Collect app. So I'll share a little bit about the model approach and how we're working with our users and partners worldwide to co-create a shared and simpler set of AI tools that can scale monitoring for everyone. So we know that monitoring coral reefs is essential, but it's hard, as Emma pointed out. I think she laid out really well all the challenges and bottlenecks for coral reef monitoring. So analyzing reef images from photo quadrats is traditionally very slow, labor-intensive when using softwares like CPCE. And teams also sit often in thousands of images that just remain pretty much underutilized and mostly stored in local machines. And platforms like Reef Cloud and CoralNet, they have really changed the game with powerful AI pipelines. But users, they still need to train about 30% of their own images and validate the model performance. And also create their own label sets. And they still need to have a bit of a machine learning know-how to interpret the metrics like F1 scores and so on. So the result is that it still limits standardization. It might slower as well the adoption for people that are not so used to machine learning, model validation, and so on, especially for smaller teams that don't have a lot of staff and time to put into training these models and the technical expertise. And also the training data is still kept in the database of these platforms, so making it a bit inaccessible to others that want tap into this training data for further AI applications. So thinking about all these challenges and barriers, when we thought about designing and integrating AI into MERMAID, we decided to instead train, instead of having, let's say, each team training and maintaining their own models, that we would train a single shared generalized model using the foundational model from CoralNet. So we collaborated with CoralNet on this one, and we gather all of their public sources of images of more than 500,000 images from 326 public sources. And we developed this beta model that we integrated into the platform. So the result is very simple and very user-friendly workflow to get coral reef images instantly classified by the model. So this works by first users just simply uploading the reef photos from their transects into MERMAID, so they can upload as a batch all their photo quadrats. And then as soon as the photos are uploaded, the beta model starts already processing and instantly classifying the points into major benthic categories like hard coral, microalgae, CCA, but also a set of hard coral genera. Then the users, they need to go through each of the photos and review and confirm the model's predictions on the 25 points that are set on each of the images. So at this point we have a beta model, so we definitely still need a human in the loop, but we're evolving fast, and we'll be releasing newer versions of this model that we'll hope will have a much higher performance. So yeah, and the good thing is that as soon as users, they confirm their annotations, they get instant results on benthic percent cover by the major groups that can be visualized in the global dashboard, the MERMAID Explorer, as summary charts and also as time series. So that really helps with data analysis and reporting. And you can readily export the data as well. And it's all standardized across all your projects and across all the users as well on the platform. So for this whole workflow, users, they don't need to train, validate, or adjust any settings for the model classification, or calculate the end metrics as well that they were looking for, like the percent benthic cover. Then the labels as well are all standardized across projects based on the existing taxonomic reference on MERMAID. So that overall makes AI more accessible to everyone, especially to smaller teams that need to speed up their image processing, and ensures as well a maximum standardization and comparability across the outputs. But this is just one key part of the AI approach that we're taking in MERMAID. But an important foundation really to this AI approach is open data. And that's really the core of how we are using AI or thinking about AI. So to build together with our users and with other platforms and initiatives. So we know that it is really hard to get access to high quality open training data sets that are essential for improving coral reef image classification and new models. So most of them are closed or inaccessible. So it really limits the progress and innovation for AI applications for coral reef data. So with the support of the AWS Imagine grant, WCS, they created the first global repository of coral reef images and annotations for AI development. So it already includes directly all the photos and confirmed annotations from MERMAID. And soon also all the public data sets from CoralNet will be available in this training bucket. And we're inviting other initiatives and platforms that have large sets of annotated images to join as well. So in MERMAID, how it works is that users, they upload their photos, they confirm the annotations, and then as soon as they submit this data in the project, all the confirmed annotations and photos are anonymized and stripped out of any metadata. And then they're added to this public training data bucket that can be used for building, training, and deploying new models. And it will be freely available to the public, so to other computer vision scientists that want that need large volumes of high quality training data to develop new models for coral reef monitoring and science. So I really believe that by pulling contributions across partners and users, we can overcome this fragmentation and training data gaps, and also improve representation of core regions worldwide and create models that are better, more accurate, and directly available to users as well in MERMAID projects, as we'll be also using this training bucket to develop and improve our own models. And one important consideration is that while we are taking these anonymized photos and annotations from MERMAID users into the bucket, all the raw monitoring data stays safe inside the MERMAID projects. So all the full transect observations that include site names, coordinates, dates, the raw observations, everything remains private and accessible only to project members in the app. And then if project admins decide if and when and how to share data, they can do so from the projects, and then they can decide to make it either private or public on MERMAID Explorer and through the MERMAID R package, and either open access or at the summary level. So it's very flexible as well on how project admins can share the data with the broader community. And data privacy is really it's like really central to our platform. So it's really key that users can still control their data, and we really ensure the security while enabling this collective use of annotations and images for AI. So the current model is in beta. So this is really just the big models and expanded genus list. Models more tuned to specific reef regions, and then also hierarchical classifications, because currently the model is not hierarchical, so it includes both the top level benthic groups, as well as the hard coral genera. So with every new photo and annotation that users put into the platform, it helps us build better models faster. So once we have a certain number of annotations and photos in the bucket, we can start experimenting and training different models, and also adding the new labels that users have contributed when confirming their annotations. So we can expand, for example, the genus list of hard coral. And yeah, and then since the launch, we already have a couple of thousands of photos uploaded, and there's over 50,000 confirmed annotations from different regions. And we released this a couple of months ago. So this is really something new in the beta phase. And by next year, we will have a V1 model to be shared with all the users. And yeah, as we're getting this training data, we're also working on the research and development of new models, including a hierarchical segmentation model in collaboration with Coralscapes project from the Transnational Red Sea Center at EPFL. So this is still like experimental, but it looks very promising. So the idea is that by moving from sparse to dense predictions paired with hierarchical benthic label set and orthogonal growth form and health status classes, we can have the potential to improve representation, accuracy, and completeness of benthic attributes with associated life history and health information, while providing a more reliable benthic cover estimate. So feel free to check out the project as well in the link below. And yeah, as I said, this is really just the beginning, and it is a collaborative effort. So we do need people to contribute with their photos, with their annotations, their expertise, so we can improve future models for everyone. So we really we invite everyone to try the beta model, share their feedback with us. And also, if you're sitting on a large volume of reef imagery with confirmed annotations, we encourage you to also join this public bucket that is free to join, and we can help you do this workflow to copy or migrate your training data. So we can really make this a collaborative, community-driven effort, and make it an open tool that can accelerate new AI models. So yeah, just wanted to share a few of the resources if you want to learn more about how to use the image classification model MERMAID. But it's very user-friendly, very straightforward, but we do have a thorough documentation in our website. And also we encourage you to sign up to our newsletter so you can stay tuned on what's next for MERMAID in the realm of AI. And yeah, thank you. And feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions besides those in the Q&A. And if you need any support as well for your teams in getting used to the platform. And if you have ideas for collaboration as well, if you have an idea for a new model that you think you could leverage from this training data and also from the environment SageMaker that we're creating to have experiments of new machine learning models, feel free to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. It's great to hear the overview of the AI approach from MERMAID and to learn more about the simple and easy image classification workflow. But also really great to hear what you guys have planned next. So thank you so much for that presentation. Our last speaker today, I'm really pleased to introduce you to Sergey Nozdrenkov, who is running the early stage startup Wildflow AI, which is focused on building foundation models for biodiversity to protect and restore coral reef ecosystems. So over to you, Sergey.
Thank you. Over a year ago, I spoke to Ben Williams, and he mentioned like this the entire field of like 3D coral reefs imagery and like requires help. So now I'm doing this. So it's all Ben's fault that I'm here. Unfortunately, I'm not a marine biologist. I'm just an engineer, so I spent 6 years at Google, first teaching satellite data, then ended up at Google X working on the biodiversity of insects, helping the bees. And I'm really bad at swimming. I sink quite well, so I decided to leverage my strength and learn free diving and scuba diving, and that's how I fell in love with the oceans. And a few years I decided to leave Google and become homeless, to create a startup in ocean biodiversity. And here we are. So I'll start with why. So first of all, life on Earth is incredible. It's been like evolving for billions of years, and coral reefs are beautiful, like incredibly complex and threatened ecosystems, and they're dying so fast. And I know that a lot of amazing people like yourselves are all over the world fighting for their lives, and we don't have much time. We need to deploy more solutions faster, and we don't have a room for error. We need to deploy like more solutions, but we need to understand how coral reefs functions, what methods work, what methods don't work, so we could coordinate precise actions. So that's why we're doing this. And I'm really, really inspired by people in the field protecting and restoring corals. It's really, really hard. And I know if you're out in the field, out planting corals by hand or doing other activities, you don't really care about like fancy technology. You just want to know whether your like efforts are working or not. And I know that in like Indonesia, in 84% of coral reef restoration, people like never come back to monitor the reefs, unfortunately, and majority of restoration fails within 3 years. So we're here just trying to help with low-cost solutions to monitor this. So how does it work? You could swim around the reef with a cheap camera like GoPro, DJI Osmo, or like more expensive DSLRs, then create the 3D model of the reef, and then analyze it, and then guide your activities in the real world, what you're going to do basically to protect it. And to be fair, 3D photogrammetry that we use has been here for decades, so there's like nothing new in this approach. We're just trying to make it scale. And the first problem we encountered was how do you even like visualize 3D models? So usually people use polygonal meshes, but they're extremely heavy, and like you don't really see corals there, and it takes like 100 years to produce them. So we tried a slightly new approach. We use like 3D Gaussian splatting, which is much faster to train, provides like photorealistic quality, and works nicely in the browser. So I'll show you hopefully some demo. So for example, this is a Hope Reef. This is a restoration site by Mars Sustainable Solutions in Indonesia. This is 20 by 50 meters in size. Hopefully you could see this in the browser, but it's probably lagging a little bit because of Zoom. And you could click on like any maybe 5 by 5 meter patch, and then zoom in and just see like tiny details there and so on. So we do have also like a protocol on how to collect the data. We know that lots of people collecting the data in similar ways. So we also like standing on the shoulders of the giants. So we're based on what Mars's team is doing, University of Exeter, Australian Institute of Marine Science, Scripps, Perry Institute, Tritonia Scientifics, and like many others. It's more like a kind of tutorial available for people to use around the world, and it's getting some adoption. So we have, for example, lots of amazing efforts. Let's say this is amazing team in Papua New Guinea, Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative. They have a local restoration site nearby, and they're also keeping an eye on coral reefs, which like requires some quite long boat ride. And so having just an ability to capture the reef is like very important, so they could explore them at least later. This one is another demo. So this is a restoration by Soneva in Maldives. I hope that this is loading and you could see this. By the way, I'm showing this just in the browser in the real time. Fingers crossed. Then If sometimes you have like visibility quite bad, it's still not a problem. You still could get a quite good quality, because the diver is usually like swimming a few meters above the reef, so that you still see all the corals. So I'll show you like one more quick demo. So this is another Mars's restoration site in Indonesia. I'll show the video. It's probably lagging. It's smooth on my side, but I don't know. So in any case, you could see this in our like Instagram or in YouTube. So many people probably saw it. We can do orthomosaics of coral reefs. So I'll show you another demo. So these orthomosaics are from 3D Gaussian splatting models. So you could interactively view them in the browser, zoom in, and like see quite a lot of good details down there. Let's see. And I think also we could learn quite a lot from satellite data. So for example, if someone tells you like, hey, we are going to download satellite data for the entire Africa into my local laptop and try processing it, everyone would think like, you are nuts, like it's so much data, it's gonna melt your laptop, it's like impossible. But for coral reefs, like if we look at 3D data, it's way heavier per 1 square meter than satellite data. Yet everyone is still kind of processing it locally, usually. It could be like university cluster and so on. And if you are, let's say, a PhD researcher, you can only like access usually data which you have maybe at your university, or you could ask a few other labs. So maybe you run your research on only like 3 data sets globally. But imagine how the world would change if any PhD researcher could, or like anyone in the world could just run their research on like thousands of sites across the globe. So we are basically building a platform where you could run analytics on top of all the data to see, let's say, how diseases propagate, or like which methods work, which methods don't work. And we open sourcing quite a lot of data as well. So this one is like recent capture from Indonesia. We published roughly like 350 gigabytes, or like 90,000 images of GoPro footage from 13 sites. It's 25 by 25 meters plots from Indonesia, together with partners from Derby University, Coral Spawning Lab, and others. And it's commercially available, so no strings attached whatsoever. So quickly, like what does 3D like enables? So there is lots of metrics you could do. So let's say structural complexity, or tracking outplant growth, or benthic composition, like identifying species, community composition, like create like early warning diseases. So the green one, this is what we have already now kind of out of the box ready. And the yellow ones is what we are working on. So it's like semi-manual still. So we're also training our models and planning to integrate with others and open source all of them. Just to continue on, what does this enable? I think like very important is to have ability to just have like kind of virtual fieldwork, so that you could explore the reefs, share like a link with a friend. They could see what's happening there, explore like maybe there is a disease there or a sponge, and come up with a good strategy how to protect them. Then for transparency and just to know what methods work, what don't work, it's important to know like map them before or after restoration. Then if there is a bleaching event is happening, you could you have maybe a small team, and it's like really hard to study the entire reef, but you could swim and like capture the data, and then you could spend maybe 6 months studying it. Or if someone left, you kind of lost all the knowledge, but at least you would have some sort of image of that. And a lot of people often ask like what you could do to coral reefs. For that, I really like this paper by Professor Forrest Rower and like Dr. Jason Baer. And they just show a lot of different coral reef interventions one could do. So like a lot of people know artificial reefs, or maybe like assisted adaptation and evolution, but there is so many other things like, I don't know, cryptobenthic translocation, or organic matter mitigation and so on. So you need like data for all of them. And like I doubt that people all over the world like doing like all of that. So usually maybe only the best research institutions do. So how do we deliver this bit to every like community around the world? So that's the question. There is lots of other ways to like analyze the data. So for example, I learned a lot from like National Geographic Pristine Seas. So they found the world's largest coral reef colony, or maybe the second largest now, in Solomon Islands, and they use like 3D molecular cartography to basically map genetic diversity of symbionts on top of the like colony. So that's 3D also important for that. And yeah, to summarize, it's basically we need to know what works, what doesn't work, what kind of make quality decisions about how do we protect the reefs, bring transparency, maybe use it as a funding magnet to bring money into the restoration. And then I think this is the quickest way to get a critical mass of data so that we could all like have a shared kind of repository of coral reef data and steer restoration efforts worldwide. And right now we've got like data from over 20 universities. Some of them have like dozens of sites. We have like super tiny team with no external funding whatsoever, like no grants and so on. We working now on protocols for free divers and surfers as well. And you could play with the models on the website or like upload yours. And just to finish, I think often kind of everyone means well, but as a collective, we're doing like terrible things, sometimes wars, sometimes destroying the planet. So it's a huge coordination challenge. And I think that only if we are working together, we have a chance to become the first generation that leaves nature behind better than we found it. And I think there's no laws of physics saying us that we can't do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergey. The models are really amazing, and it's really great to visualize how we can track these changes over time. And your last message, leaving nature behind better than we found it, I think is super important. So thanks so much for highlighting that. We have about 10 minutes left for a Q&A, and I note there's quite a few questions in the chat, so we'll do our best to get through a couple of those, and then any of those unanswered, the panelists, I'm sure, would be happy to try and answer those after the webinar, and then we can drop that out to people. So one of the first ones I think that we know is directed to Andy, and it was from Vijay, who said that he's interested in knowing how much data is needed to apply ML model to coral reefs. The data pipeline can definitely be a sticking point for non-specialists in data science. Thanks.
Thanks very much for the question. Yes, we spoke already about the sense of placement and how it's someone had asked about active learning and how that gives you an efficient way to measure data forecast and minimize the data that you need. But let's just think about the vision examples, because that's really tangible. And I think a lot of people are doing that. To train a foundation model, you need, well, maybe millions, but at least hundreds of thousands of images, labeled ones. And I saw lots of questions. How do we label? What tools are you using for labeling and all that sort of thing? It's a critical problem. Where we are now in terms of modern AI is moving out of that phase. Ben was mentioning these great applications of fine-tuning, transfer learning. This is where big companies, big computers, train foundation models, and these can now be adjusted to downstream tasks. Something that we're focused on are building far smaller models still, but ones which can learn in context. So when you can fine tune at inference time. So this means going from hundreds of thousands, maybe to hundreds or thousands for fine tuning, but then in context means we're talking tens of data samples, example data sets, data points for the specific problem that you're trying to solve. And the point is then when you measure the uncertainty around the predictions in the computer vision model relative to just few data points, you know how far you've gone away from that pre-training foundation model and how close you are to this new refined set that you've got. So not only that, but using world models such as text prompting allows you to perform detection with zero shot. So that means no data. Again, something to prevent hallucinations. You measure the risk in, but it's an exciting time, and our focus is certainly on minimizing the data need and minimizing the carbon footprint.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andy. We've also had one come in from Owen, which is directed to Ben, and he says that we're developing a program with charter boat companies in the Eastern Caribbean to use sensors to prevent sewage pollution near coral reefs. Would it be useful to fit acoustic sensors on yachts to collect geo-referenced sound data? They're stationary in shallow water near coral reefs for large amounts of time. Curious to discuss.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be an interesting project to try. I talked about a similar thing many years ago with Professor Steve Simpson at Bristol, who's one of my PhD supervisors. I'd look him up. This is right up his street. Yeah, if the boats are stationary and the engine isn't running, then it can be a great way to gather data from reef habitats if they're adjacent, and perhaps that could be useful for measuring pollution impacts and places that aren't impacted, or just growing the database of reef sensors out there. I would recommend looking up World Ocean Passive Acoustic Monitoring Day, so that's WPAM, who like to collect data from all around the world, as many places as possible, on a particular day each year, and contribute data to that. So that could also be a really valuable way to contribute to the acoustic community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ben. And we've seen this question come up quite a few times, so I'm going to open it up to all of the panelists and the speakers. But people are interested to hear about the carbon footprint or water requirements of using this sort of technology at scale. So if any or all of you are happy to comment, then please do.
I'm happy to come in on that one first. Yeah, it's a question we get a lot. And I like to frame it like this. So we hear a lot about the energy impact of AI because of the frontier language models being developed by the leading labs. So OpenAI, DeepMind, Anthropic. For example, GPT-4. So that was the model behind ChatGPT for pretty much all of last year. That it's estimated it took about the equivalent of 20,000 UK homes running for a year in terms of carbon footprint to train. And then all the usage of us logging on and using it, it was maybe several times that. And the latest generation of models probably several times that again. So this is enormous. But a lot of the AI tools we're all talking about and using, for example, in my own work as a PhD student, I might use a single GPU rather than the tens of thousands that OpenAI used. I might use it a few days a month, and it's going to be equivalent to a few days of a household's carbon footprint. And much of the AI tools I think we're talking about here, for example, my work, Reef Cloud, modeling reefs, Soji, what Soji's doing, at the moment, that primarily needs, a few days of a time to train a model, and then it's really cheap to inference. What is of concern is if we move to agentic workflows that are using language models at scale with thousands of these agents coming together and giving input and getting a consensus decision, that can become very costly. And I think we will transition to that point. So we're not there yet. But a lot of the approaches presented today, I think the carbon footprint is far outweighed. The very small carbon footprint is far outweighed by the benefits that it's having. But yeah, I'm sure others might have thoughts on that too.
Go ahead, Andy.
Well, I got my hand up, so there you go. Yes, certainly do. Yeah, I'll come at this from the agentic angle and the LLM angle. And certainly my experience and some things that we're working on in the company mean that I would say the future is bright. And so the reason for this is I showed you that we were using agentic workflows there for managing data and performing analysis. In a lot of the work that we've deployed there, all of those models can run on device. By that, I mean my laptops and our customers' hardware, CPU hardware. What we're building here at digiLab are slim agent architectures. And so one way to think about the way that sort of agents have been developed and used, so ChatGPT is flying around in the cloud. It's some genius that can take all sorts of unstructured text and tell you about anything. Well, that's not quite necessary for the agent tasks that are needed. We just sort of realized, oh, great, well, these models can read a situation, make predictions, and we can just choose what predictions we wanted to make. But actually, a much more refined model where it doesn't have to know, I don't know, about the soccer scores of Burnley when it's trying to predict whether it should look up a data table, are not necessary for this model. So what we've been able to do is refine them really specifically in the context of reinforcement learning, use live reinforcement learning as well to boost their predictability. But that's the direction that we're taking to. Not to mention just for the carbon footprint, but also from the point of view of security and data sovereignty. So there's a tremendous issue of being able to export your data from your organizations. But yeah, I think it's an optimistic future in that direction.
Amazing. Thanks so much for your answers there. I think we have time for one more question before the closing. So this one is for Alex, and it's got maybe Emma as well in brackets. So please feel free to answer. But they're wondering, how do these AI models get updated with taxonomy changes? For instance, there was that recent paper that came out saying there was formerly IDED as Aquapora hyacinthus. Across the GBR is actually 7 species. When these things happen, the models are then no longer accurate. How can they then be changed to match updated taxonomy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So taxonomy is evolving very fast, especially with genomics coming in. So in the case of MERMAID, and yeah, Emma should come in to comment on that from a Reef Cloud angle. But we have like a standard taxonomic database that we use, and we check against swarms to make sure that all the scientific names are validated. And whenever we do train the model, because there will be several iterations, and then we rework the label set, then we always check what's the latest taxonomy for coral genus, coral genera. So we would then use this new taxonomy, like the latest, the most up to date. But then obviously there would be a certain lag between the last model that still uses the previous labels to the new model that will then be integrated, deployed with the new labels. So it's possible. And also, if users have past data that use those past labels, those are still the way they are. They won't be changed as the labels for the new models are changed. So there's that we need to take into account when looking at data sets, like what's the time of the data sets and the models used. Yeah. So maybe Emma has more insights on that too.
Because Reef Cloud works a little bit differently, but it's actually been one of the advantages for us because there was a big taxonomy shift. And it meant that, if you had a long-term monitoring project like AIMS or the Palau International Coral Reef organization that I mentioned, like it was an issue, particularly if you had one coral species and then it split into two. So we actually worked with PICRIC to go back through all their data, and they had 23 years worth of monitoring, so it would have been too much to go back manually and do it all. But the advantage of the AI is that we can ask for the particular labels that we know is that particular species, bring them all up, and then just have a panel of all the coral that you're interested in splitting out, and then you can go through and split them all and retrain the machine really, really fast. So it's been a really good way to be able to not have that like break in your data where the taxonomy changes and up until X point it's all this and then it changes, but you can just go whiz back through your entire data set and adjust it. And it still takes a human to sit down and eyeball those and keep annotating until the machine is performing really well. But it was one of the advantages.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can always rerun them, like train the model using the new taxonomy and then rerun using the past data. That's the advantage of having images instead of a benthic PIT or LIT. You cannot go back through that data.
Thank you so much. And I know there's quite a few more questions on there, but unfortunately we only have about a minute left of the webinar. So we will try to answer those questions as best we can. But just in closing, just to round off sort of what we've heard today, we all know that coral reefs are at a tipping point. So it's clear that without urgent action, we risk losing not only the reefs themselves, but also the critical benefits they provide. So food security for up to 1 billion people, coastal protection for vulnerable communities, and livelihoods that drive local and global economies. It's clear there's hope. So as we've heard today, new technologies such as AI can help us scale and how we monitor coral reefs, providing faster, more accurate, and more consistent data than ever before. So this data really empowers decision makers. It will strengthen resilience planning, and it will ensure that conservation and restoration efforts are targeted where they are needed most. We know the challenge is bigger than any single nation or institution, so that's why mobilizing governments, practitioners, scientists, and communities together is essential by combining global commitment with innovation, so we can shift the trajectory for coral reefs. So the message we leave with you today is clear. The time to act is now, and together we must accelerate action for coral reefs. I've seen a few of the questions in the chat. We have recorded this, and the resources will be uploaded onto the dedicated events page, and it will also be on our ICRI YouTube channel. So if you scan the QR code, that will be there, and all of the presentations will be made available as well. We're working on our next webinars, which will include one on Bleaching Awareness Month, as well as an upcoming webinar on the ICRI Restoration Regulatory Guidelines. And we're also hoping to host another webinar on AI for coral reef restoration, among other topics. So do stay posted as we share updates with you shortly. And then finally, a big thank you to all of our speakers for your fabulous presentations, and to our partners of the webinar, the Reef Resilience Network, MERMAID, Wildflow, UCL, Reef Cloud, and Blue Pangolin, hosted under the ICRI chairmanship of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. A special thank you to digiLab for their invaluable support and all of the behind-the-scenes work in making this webinar possible. It's been great to co-host with you. Thank you as well to our tech support team for their assistance, and of course a big thank you to all of you who have joined us today, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next webinar. So again, a big thank you from us at ICRI.